Okay, guys, this is a video just to go over how to do the mastery quiz. So these are problems that are a lot like those on the mastery quiz. Let me just go over some of the things that I see people struggling with. So let's just remember what we talked about was when we're solving an equation, what we're trying to do is undo whatever is being done to x. And we want to do that. Um, so we want to look at what happens first, and that's what we're going to undo last. So we're going to have to remember PEMDAS, so that's going to be that we're going to remember that we have parentheses, exponents, multiplication and division, and then addition and subtraction. Okay, so now as we look at that, then we're going to look at every problem and say, well, what would we do first and last? And whatever we would do last in the order of operations is what we're going to undo first. So even though in math, when we check our answer, we want to make sure that we're going to go direction downward. When we're solving, we're going to undo those operations. Okay. The other thing you got to remember is your integer operations. And so a lot of you, we've talked about that, if I'm going to add, I've been teaching it lately of, look, don't worry about what you start with, but think about what direction you're moving. So if I'm adding a positive 7 to something, then I'm going to go to the right. And if I'm subtracting a positive 7, I go to the left. Right? And then if I am adding a negative 7, I go to the left. And if I'm going to subtract a negative 7, I'm going to go to the right. So it doesn't matter what number I'm starting with, as long as I remember these directions in my order of operations. Okay? So when I look at this first problem, 7x plus 35 equals negative 35. Well, if I'm looking at my operations here, then what I want to do is this is multiplication and this is addition. If I look at PEMDAS, the last thing I'm going to do is addition. So that's the first thing I'm going to undo. So to undo addition, I'm going to subtract 35 from both sides. Okay, so now if I'm going to do that, then I rewrite this. This is going to be 7x plus this is 0, so it's just going to be 7x. And I've taught you to draw a line down the equal sign, so we know we're doing it to both sides. Okay, and then what I need to think about is if I'm subtracting 35. Well, if I'm subtracting 35, then I'm subtracting, you're either adding a negative 35 or subtracting a positive, then we're going this way. We're going to the left. So if I was going to the left, 35, and I started at negative 35, well, zero's over here, so I'm going to be at negative 70. Okay. And then, so now the next thing is, this is 7 times x equals negative 70. And the way I undo multiplication is I divide. So I'm going to divide both sides by 7. I'm going to x equals negative 10. And then, of course, you always check your solution. So you're going to start out with the original equation of 7x plus 35 equals negative 35. And then what we're going to do is plug in 7 times negative 10 plus 35. And that's going to be negative 70 plus 35. And again, that's if we're at negative 70, we're adding 35. We're going to the right 35. So we're going to be at negative 35 here. And this side was negative 35. So, yep, our solution is x equals negative 10. Okay, so when we look at this problem now, well, we're going to remember what we talked about before, the order of operations and the direction that we're going when we're adding, subtracting numbers. So again, if I look at order of operations, this is multiplication, 5 times y, and this is, I told you to always change things to addition. So you would rewrite this as 5y plus, and then this is going to be negative 25 equals 100. Okay, and so now if I look at this, this is multiplication, 5 times y, and then I have adding negative 25. So if I'm going backwards, I'm going to undo the addition. The way I undo adding negative 25 is to add a positive 25 to both sides, which means on the left side, I still have 5y because this gave me negative 25 plus 25 gave me 0. And then on the right-hand side of the equation, I have 125. Now again, this is 5 times y. So then what I'm going to do is undo the multiplication with division. So I'm going to divide both sides by 5. And I'm going to get that y equals, well, so 125 divided by 5 is going to be 25. And again, I check, right? Because if you just if some of you may be getting the wrong answers and you're just not checking to know you got the wrong answers. So again, if I'm going to check, then I'm going to write that out. 5 times y minus 25 is supposed to equal 100. And we said that y was 25, so we're going to have 5 times 25 minus 25. And the right-hand side is not changing. It's still just 100. 5 times 25 is 125 minus the 25, which means 125 minus 25 is 100. And the other side was already 100. Yep, we've got the right answer. Y equals 25. So again, what we did was we're just undoing the pathway. Now this mastery quiz is less difficult than what you're going to do on the expressions and equations quiz, but this one is going to help because this one's good practice. Okay, so now on this one, again, we're just going to undo, right? So if we look, this is division, and this is addition. So when we look over at the scale, we have division is first, and then we would do addition. So when we undo it, we're going to undo the addition first. Well, so we undo addition with subtraction. So we're going to subtract 5 from both sides. Now here's where I expect to see a mistake. I'm going to see people that'll give me -1 on this, or +1. But remember, when we look at this scale, if I'm subtracting a positive, I always go to the left. So that means if I subtract 5, I'm going to go this way. And I'm at -4, so that means 0's over on the right-hand side. So that means I'm going to have -9. Okay, so that means this is going to be, I subtracted 5 so I could have 0 there. So I'm going to have x over 12 equals -9. So my next step is that I'm looking at this x is being divided by 12. So if x is being divided by 12, I undo division with multiplication. So I'm going to multiply both sides times 12, which just gives me 12x divided by 12. 12 divided by 12 is 1. So I'm left with just x over on this side. and negative times a positive is a negative. 9 times 12 is 108. So I have negative 108. So x equals negative 108. So now when I check this, I'm going to have x over 12 plus 5 is supposed to equal negative 4. So I plug in negative 108 divided by 12 plus 5 is supposed to equal negative 4. And if I look, negative 108 divided by 12 is negative 9 plus 5 is supposed to equal negative 4, and negative 9 plus 5 is negative 4. So I do have the right answer. Okay, so now when we look at this, one of the things we talked about, if we were to check this, well, if I were to check this and just guess a number, let's say I guess 3. Okay, so I'd have t plus 8 over 5. If I put 3 in there, I have 3 plus 8 over 5. And what I would need to remember is I'm going to have to add the 3 plus 8 before I can divide it by 5. So that's the hard part of this one. So if I look, I'm going to just automatically draw parentheses around the top so that I understand I have to simplify the numerator before I can take care of the denominator if I'm following order of operations. But remember, when we're solving, we're going to take that backwards. So if I'm going to take that backwards, then I'm going to multiply both sides. To undo the dividing by 5, I'm going to multiply both sides by 5. Which 5 divided by 5 is 1. So now I'm left with t plus 8 on this side. And 13 times 5 is going to be 65. Now how do I, and my next question is so here I've solved this part and I have t plus 8. How do I undo adding 8? I'm going to undo adding 8 by subtracting 8 from both sides. So I'm going to wind up with t equals 65 minus 8 is 57. So the hard part on this seems to be remembering that that's what you have to do is put a parentheses here. And that you would, in order of operation, remember we're solving an equation, we talked about we're really going to undo the order of operations. We look at what will we do last, and that's what we undo first. Okay, and so we would have to, when we plug the number in, if I put in 57, so my equation was t, and we said t was 57 plus 8 divided by 5 is supposed to equal 13. Well, 57 plus 8 is 65 divided by the 5 is supposed to, again, equal the 13. And 65 divided by 5 is 13. So these are balanced. But we would, again, we had to simplify the top first when we were doing order of operations. So that's the thing you have to remember with this. That's what I would have written on my note card. Okay, so when I look at these, when we look at this, then what we would normally do is look and say, well, there's 2 ways to solve this. I taught you to get rid of mama. All right, but we also taught you to use distributive property. So remember, when we look at this, what we're talking about is, here's mama, the number that's going to be distributed. Because what this means right here is you have 7 sets of p minus 5. Now, if you're not sure what that means, go back and watch the video on distributive property. Okay? So for me, the simplest way is you could just distribute the 7 and you would get it right. But you have to remember to distribute the 7 all the way through. And what people forget to do, the most common mistake is for people to write down 7p minus 5 equals 49. But what's not happening here is mama hasn't You could see mama kissing the P, but mama's not kissing the 5. You have to distribute that 7 all the way through. So this should have been 7P minus 7 times 5. Okay, so that means now what I have is 7P minus 35 equals 49. So then, and I taught you to rewrite everything as addition, so you'd say this is 7P plus negative 35. And now I go back to, doing the reverse of order of operations. So I'm going to undo the adding, and that means I'm going to subtract negative 35, or I'm going to add positive 35. Because if I add positive 35 to negative 35, I'm going to get 0. That adds up to 0. So I'm going to add 35 to both sides. I'm going to get 7P equals, well, this is going to be 84. And now this is 7 times P, so to undo that, I need to divide both sides by 7. So I get P equals 12. Now, I taught you in class to do it a different way. If you had 7P minus 5 equals 49, you could look and say, well, who's mama? Here's mama. I'm going to just get rid of mama and divide both sides by 7. Because 7 divided by 7 is 1. So now I just have P minus 5, and 49 divided by 7 is 7. The 7 divided by 7 was 1, so I had one set. Okay, and so now I can just look at this and say, well, P minus 5, how do you undo subtracting 5? You're going to add 5 to both sides, and I get that P equals 12. Oh, look, it's the same answer. And it doesn't make a difference which way you do it. I don't care. Nobody cares. You could choose either way. I'm glad if you understand both ways, because you'll see there's times when you strategically want to use both ways. Either one of those ways, there's not one that's better or worse than the other. It's just one that works better in some situations and makes life easier, and one that makes it easier in other situations. So that's the gist of it. So when we talk about these, what you're doing with this, it all comes back to what we're doing here. That one, the most common mistake is not understanding order of operations and not undoing it correctly. And the other is making simple mistakes with your integer operations. So if I were you, I would make sure that you have something like this written down. And this year, what I've learned is I think it's easier for me to explain it first by saying, well, look at what's happening, what's being done, draw out what that would look like, and then put the number in place. So you know, if I'm adding 7, I'm going to go to the right. No matter what number, if I started out with negative 68, if I started out with negative 45, if I started out with positive 45, I'm still going to go to the right 7. And so that's important to remember. So when you're looking at this, these reviews should have helped you if you're still struggling with that mastery quiz. Okay, so just want to make sure you have a head start, walk through it again, take some notes. Remember, it all comes down to you're undoing what would happen if you plugged it in. Always check your answer. Okay, so if I check this one, it would be that I'm going to have 7 times P minus 5 equals 49. Now you really want to pay attention to this, because that when you look, this is a big part of one of the next tests when we talk about solving equations and expressions. So you have to remember that you're not going to use distributive property right now. when you simplify this, because if you're making a mistake in distributive property somewhere, you're just going to reproduce that. So what we're going to do is just plug it in 7 times, and we said P was 12, so we're going to have 12 minus 5. We're just going to plug in the 12 where it belongs into P, right? And then we're going to do what's in the parentheses first. So what's in the parentheses first is 12 minus 5, which is 7. Now, so that means we still have 7 times 7. And 7 times 7 is 49. So these two are balanced when we plug in that P is 12. Okay, so again, you're just undoing it, but when you check, you're going to follow order of operations always. Okay? Okay, good luck.